In the first scene, we see a man getting dressed, then taking his dog and heading somewhere. While a priest in the local church is conducting a sacred ritual, the man with the dog arrives at another man's place. He grabs an axe, and they silently walk off together. Taking his rifle, the priest joins the two men. Meanwhile, Camille Borgman woke up, sensing something was wrong. He had been living underground all this time. Seeing the three unexpected visitors, Borgman began to pack hurriedly, but those who came for him already knew he was here. The men started digging the ground and breaking the structure. To buy himself some time, Borgman released gas and ran through the tunnel. The priest figured out Borgman's intention to escape. Exiting the tunnel, Borgman dashed through the forest until he reached another underground hideout, where Ludwig lives. Borgman warned Ludwig, as well as Pascal who also lives underground, that they had been found. Now they needed to hide. Making sure none of the three men were at the gas station, Borgman went into the restroom and tidied himself up a bit. Then he entered the first house he came across and asked the owner for permission to take a bath. Of course the woman immediately shut the door in his face. Borgman decided to try his luck at another house. The door was opened by a man named Richard. Naturally he had no intention of letting a stranger into his home. Introducing himself as Anton, Borgman claimed to know Richard's wife, but Marina said she had never seen this man before. Since Borgman was very persistent, Richard lost his temper and beat him. Marina tried to stop her husband, but Richard's rage was too strong. Then he started accusing his wife of lying. Borgman had earlier claimed that Marina used to work as a nurse and had cared for him, but the woman denied this. She was certain she was seeing this man for the first time in her life. When Marina stepped outside again, Borgman was no longer in the yard. Later Stina, the nanny, brought Richard and Marina's 3 children home. The father read them a bedtime story. Despite the late hour, Richard, a television producer, had to go to work. Marina couldn't shake a sense of unease, thinking that the mysterious vagrant was still somewhere nearby. She checked the garage, but no one was there. Could the man have hidden in the forest? When Marina returned to the house, Borgman immediately revealed his presence. Surprisingly, the woman didn't chase him away but treated his wounds, asking Stina not to tell Richard about it. Marina also allowed Borgman to take a bath and fed him. She truly felt pity for this unfortunate man, unaware that he had secrets to hide. Marina decided that the vagrant would spend the night in the guest house. When Richard returned from work, he suspected nothing. The wife didn't want to talk to him. The couple's younger daughter, Isolde, wasn't feeling well, so she would stay home today. When Stina took the other 2 children, Rebecca and Leo, to school, Borgman quietly snuck into the house. Isolde saw him and told her parents she had seen a wizard. Richard thought his daughter was delirious from the fever. Realizing things couldn't go on like this, Marina politely asked Borgman to leave. She was genuinely ashamed of her husband's behavior, but she had done all she could. Borgman begged the woman to let him stay for a few more days. In the end she gave in. Borgman remained in contact with his comrades. At breakfast, Marina asked her husband what had come over him the day before. Richard replied that he had only wanted to protect his family. As usual, the gardener arrived. Marina was working in the studio on her paintings when suddenly her solitude was disturbed by Borgman, who wasn't supposed to appear here. He only wanted to take another bath. Reluctantly, Marina allowed him to. Seeing that her husband had returned earlier than expected, Marina panicked. Borgman assured that he would leave before Richard entered the house. And indeed, the head of the family didn't notice the presence of an outsider. To make it up to his wife, he gave her an expensive necklace. Later, when the husband fell asleep in front of the TV, Marina took dinner to Borgman in the guest house, but he was not there. Marina realized that it was possible to watch their house from here. Seeing 2 large dogs in the house through binoculars, Marina rushed back immediately. Meanwhile, Borgman was telling the children a story about a monster that lived in a deep lake. The children were not at all afraid of the vagrant. The presence of the dogs in the house did not bother Borgman. Finding him in the room, Marina repeated that he shouldn't be here. The dogs ran out of the house. Marina saw it through the window. She scolded the nanny for not watching the children closely enough. Marina began to have nightmares about her husband finding out the truth. She started taking out her frustrations on Stina. Richard couldn't help but notice the change in the wife's behavior. She knew Borgman was still nearby and followed him into the forest. Borgman stated that he intended to leave because he was tired of hiding. For some reason, Marina didn't want Borgman to go. Richard obviously wouldn't like it, but the vagrant could stay in some other role. Ilanka and Brenda received a call from Camille Borgman. Brenda asked if he had all the necessary materials. Borgman assured that everything was under control. Now he wanted to take the gardener's place in this luxurious house. First, Borgman watched him for a long time, and then he shot him with a homemade poisonous dart. Almost immediately the man felt unwell, and with each passing minute, it got worse. Borgman went into the garage and pretended to have nothing to do with it. The gardener refused to go to the hospital, asking Borgman to drive him home. The pain was growing worse. On the way, Borgman decided to stop at a hardware store and buy all the necessary building materials. Only after that did he take the gardener home, explaining the situation to his wife. While the woman tended to her husband, Borgman added more poison to his water. He also assured the woman that he had already called the doctor. She didn't understand who could want to harm her husband, as he had never done anything bad to anyone. Borgman said that drinking plenty of water always helps with poisoning and handed the woman a glass. The doorbell rang. Standing there were Brenda, introducing herself as Dr. Caper, and her companion Ilonka. The gardener was already lying unconscious. After examining him, Brenda said he needed to be taken to the hospital as soon as possible. As soon as the woman turned away, Ilonka attacked her. Brenda joined in, taking the gardener's wife's life. Afterward, the women dissolved cement and poured it over the victims. Realizing the gardener had disappeared, Marina hurried to put away all the tools he had left behind. His boot was thrown far away. When the husband came and asked what had happened, Marina said that the gardener had quit to take care of his sick wife. In recent days, everything seemed unreal to Marina. It was as if something was happening around them. Richard thought his wife was just tired. Their conversation was interrupted by the children, who said they were hungry. That evening, Borgman, Brenda and Ilonka calmly watched television in the gardener's house. The next day, they saw Ludwig and Pascal on the road, but Borgman just drove past them. Pascal called Borgman, demanding an explanation, but he refused to discuss it. The trio left the bodies in the lake. Pascal and Ludwig checked into a hotel. Borgman called them, asking them to deal with something. Richard asked his wife if she had found a new gardener. Marina replied that 5 candidates were coming tomorrow. Richard intended to personally take part in the interviews. All the candidates were unsuitable because Ludwig and Pascal had put them up to it. The men systematically got rid of those who were actually looking for work. Richard was dissatisfied with all the candidates. After shaving and tidying up his appearance, Borgman came to the interview, introducing himself as Camille. Richard didn't recognize him, unlike Marina. The youngest daughter, Isolde, noticed an unconscious man in the nearby forest but said nothing. Meanwhile, Borgman, like a professional, inspected the garden. Marina explained to the children that this man might become their new gardener. Borgman told his potential employer that there was a lot of work to be done in the garden. And if he stayed somewhere around here, he could get it done much faster. Borgman's accomplices were keeping the situation under control. No one should interfere with their plans. Richard showed the new gardener to the guest wing of their house. That night Marina couldn't sleep, thinking about this mysterious man. What secret was he hiding? Seeing Isolde's torn toy in the sandbox, Marina considered it an ominous sign. The next morning, the gardener got to work. Marina scolded her daughter, saying that nothing in this house could be broken with impunity. Richard witnessed this and thought that his wife was simply emotionally exhausted. Marina brought Borgman some food and asked, "Is Camille your real name?" He replied that it was. Marina tried to engage him in conversation, but Borgman worked silently, taking his new responsibilities very seriously. Marina was completely confused. Stina asked for permission to bring her boyfriend, a soldier on leave, to the house today. Marina refused, saying she couldn't let a stranger into the house. First she wanted to meet him. Seeing strangers in the guest house, Marina was puzzled. Borgman introduced her to Ludwig and Pascal. After that, Borgman continued his work in the garden. Before bed, he told the children a story. The uninvited guests intruded more and more deeply into the family's life. Marina was plagued by anxiety, leading to frequent arguments with her husband. Ludwig and Pascal were living with Borgman in the guest house. Marina began to feel attracted to Camille, but he asked her to be patient. Borgman dug huge pits in the garden and felled trees. Looking in the mirror, Richard noticed a drawn cross on his shoulder and was bewildered. The conflicts between the spouses continued. Marina accused her husband of not helping around the house. When Pascal and Ludwig took the children to school, Marina thought it was her chance to be alone with Borgman, but he was nowhere to be found. Seeing a dog in the guest house, Marina for some reason thought it was Camille. But it turned out to be just a neighbor's dog. Borgman and his friends showed Isolde, Rebecca and Leo a secret underground hideout, giving them some sort of drink. By the time Marina had lunch ready, Borgman and his friends had already brought the children back. Stina decided to introduce her boyfriend Arthur to Marina. The mistress didn't mind if the guy stayed for dinner. Isolde, Rebecca and Leo were sleeping in front of the TV, unresponsive to anything. Richard came home from work in a bad mood. Marina announced that the gardeners would be dining with them today and asked Stina to go cut some flowers. But in the garden, there were only piles of dirt. Pascal said he knew where the flowers were but would only show them if Stina came into the guest house to sit with him. When she entered, Pascal immediately closed the door. Richard met Arthur, who sensed that something was off in this house. Stina had been gone for a long time, so Marina asked Arthur to go look for her. Pascal said that the girl had already gone to the kitchen with a bouquet of flowers. Stina indeed returned, complaining to the mistress that there were no more flowers in the garden, so she had to go far to find some. Arthur couldn't help but notice that his girlfriend was irritated. Marina, however, stubbornly pretended that everything was fine. Richard was categorically against having wine at dinner. He didn't want his wife to give in to her emotions completely. This led to yet another conflict between the couple. Richard was tired of Marina constantly ruining things. It was at that moment he admitted that he had been fired. Dinner passed in tense silence. Stina smiled at Pascal. When Marina started asking Arthur questions about his family, Richard didn't like this interrogation, but the guy didn't mind. It turned out that it was Arthur's father who had fired Richard earlier that day. The tension escalated. Richard called Arthur's father a liar, which the guy didn't appreciate. It got to the point of a fight. Suddenly Ludwig knocked Arthur out. That night, Stina wanted to stay with Pascal, but he politely declined her company. The girl was disappointed. Ludwig left unconscious Arthur at a bus stop. Tomorrow is Isolde's birthday, but Richard is in no mood to celebrate. Marina promised the daughter that they would throw a party tomorrow, no matter what. Richard asked his wife for a private conversation. He can no longer pretend that nothing is happening. Additionally, Richard is scared of the mark on his shoulder. He has no idea how it appeared. Their conversation was interrupted by the nanny, who was about to put the children to bed. Despite the husband's disapproval, Marina poured herself some wine. In the morning, Stina woke Marina, saying that Isolde, Rebecca and Leo were sick. They indeed looked sluggish and were very sleepy. Marina intended to call a doctor. In the garden, Borgman and his friends were busy with work. Stina informed them that Marina had called a doctor. Brenda and Ilonka went to Dr. Baumgart's office and took his life. Pretending to be a doctor again, Brenda examined Marina's son and daughters, stating that it was just exhaustion. Marina found it strange that they all got sick at the same time. Perhaps the conflicts in the family triggered it. Richard wanted to make peace with his wife, who had started drinking more wine, but at some point he began to act aggressively. It turned out to be another one of Marina's nightmares, and mistaking it for reality, she attacked her husband. Richard could no longer tolerate this and left. Marina told Borgman that she wanted to get rid of her husband but needed help. It had to happen as soon as possible. Late at night, Richard returned. In a rush, Marina put on the necklace he had recently given her and met him at the door, making it clear that she wanted to reconcile. Richard said that he had removed the tattoo and already felt much better. Borgman asked all the family members, as well as Stina, to sit on chairs in the garden. Then the fake gardeners, along with Ilonka and Brenda, performed a short play on an improvised stage. When the show ended, everyone applauded. Richard hugged Borgman as a sign of gratitude. When Marina offered wine, this time Richard didn't object. Borgman went to the kitchen under the pretext of washing his hands and added some substance to Richard's wine glass. The mother asked Isolde to bring the glass to her father. Richard didn't suspect anything and drank the wine. Soon after, Marina and Borgman joined him, raising a toast to the garden. Then Borgman decided to leave the couple alone and, wishing them good night, left. From the guest house, Borgman and his accomplices watched what was happening. Suddenly Richard felt extremely unwell. Marina did not try to help her husband, she just watched him suffer. A few minutes later Richard passed away. Marina showed no reaction, only removing the necklace. Borgman and the others entered the house. Brenda and Ilonka promised Marina that everything would be alright. Borgman turned on some music and asked Marina to bring something to drink. But the woman was concerned about something else. Her lifeless husband still lay in the house. Borgman didn't see this as a problem and gave Marina a pill. The woman trusted Camille without question and wanted to be with him, but it was obvious that this was not part of his plan. The party was in full swing inside the house. Borgman invited Brenda to dance right in front of Marina. Pascal and Ilonka silently left. Marina could no longer bear it. Taking the wine, she went outside and sat in the car. Meanwhile, Pascal and Ludwig were cleaning up the traces of the crime. A heavy rain began. Marina returned to the house, where Ilonka was frying eggs. Taking Marina by the hand, Borgman led her to another room and offered her more wine. They drank in silence. Marina was ready for anything, having fallen in love with Borgman. Suddenly she lost consciousness. Borgman left the bedroom. The next morning, they buried Marina in the garden. Then Borgman and his accomplices prepared to leave the house, taking Stina and the children with them. Share in the comments what you think the moral of this story is. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.